Hello, everybody. I hope that everybody is doing well. I know that we are in incredibly uncertain times right now, and continuing to be so. We have been throughout this pandemic that has been going on for months, and that is still continuing on, even though the conversation isn't in the forefront. It's still. It's still something that is ongoing and having an ongoing effect on people's lives and the things that they're dealing with, coupled with the issues surrounding racism in my country, which is the United States. Also other places, although I'm obviously at the moment more focused on the racial issues that are taking place in the United States, which is where I'm from. So I've heard a lot. I have listened and I have heard a lot of things over the last 6 months plus, right? I've definitely heard a lot of fear and a lot of frustration and a lot of uncertainty surrounding the continuing effects of the pandemic. I mean, the fears to livelihood, the loss of livelihood, loss of income, the loss of stability that I've seen and heard from people in the greater community, but also in my local community, and the effects that that is having, and the fear and the uncertainty and the again unstable atmosphere that people are in is really terrifying and affecting people's lives and their ability to take care of themselves and the people that they need to take care of, and it has been difficult. I have definitely heard and am continuing to try to hear and listen to the voices in the United States, especially from the Black community, and the sadness, the sorrow, the fears, yes, in even the rage and the anger that we're hearing from American Black people and communities is powerful, and I think it's impossible not to hear those things and to really have that impact you and have that make you stop and have to think, no matter how non-racist you might think yourself to be, no matter how you may have situated yourself as feeling as if you kind of had these things worked out and figured out. There is no way to see what is happening and hear what is happening in the voices of the Black communities and the Black people in the United States and not be forced to stop and think and to stop and re-examine what's going on in yourself and also what's going on in the world around you in terms of racism. I've also seen and heard in not just the community or not just in my country, but in my family as well, of people who have members of the family in law enforcement or in the National Guard or in these types of or even in the location that they live in, that have been affected by what is going on, and the fear and the uncertainty and the confusion and even anger that's going on, again, not just in the greater community, but in my community and my family and extended family, and having and the confusion and the anger and the questioning that is happening, and the fear for those family members and loved ones, and the things that those things bring up, and also the messages that I receive from other people. I have also seen a lot of fear and confusion and even anger. I mean, I think that these things are echoing in so many different ways from so many different avenues throughout the world, of people who, as I said even before, just a minute ago, about trying to figure out what do they really believe, what are the systems that are in place that they don't even think about or that they don't even realize that are there. A lot of self-examination, a lot of feeling like they need to do something and they need to react, but not knowing how to do so. So on all of these different levels, there is so much fear and uncertainty and anger and sadness and confusion that is just permeating everything in society right now. And it's difficult to know what to do with that and to know how to best address those types of things. For myself, I am somebody who is not particularly reactionary. I never have been. And I think it is a combination of many factors. I think it's a combination of being a Libra. I think it's a combination of being a Libra of most of my adult life. If you've watched my channel, you know most of my adult life I have worked a lot with Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism or engaged Buddhism from Thich, Nhat, Hanh. It's a primary part of, I spent many years really sinking into those ideologies until that has become sort of ground zero, right? That's kind of where I step back into when anything destabilizes in myself or in the world that is around me. Those are the spaces in which I step back into. You know, some people might step back into a church or into a particular practice. I step back into those precepts. Part of those precepts, or the main part of those precepts, especially in regards to Thich Nhat Hanh, which if I were to have one person in my life, dead or alive, he happens to still be alive and in the world today, that I would consider to be a primary teacher, it would be Thich Nhat Hanh. He would be the one person, you know, when you have those lists or those questions that say, you know, if you could meet one person and just spend time with that person, having a conversation and having that ability to have that conversation, taking out loved ones that you might want to see again or things like that, but just that in terms of having that deep conversation with a person that has really impacted you, for me that would be Thich Nhat Hanh. So the reactionary point for that, or the place to step back into that, is one of compassionate listening. It isn't reaction. In fact, it's completely contrary to everything that I know in myself, but also in terms of my beliefs, to act or speak as a reaction to pain, or a reaction to anger, or a reaction to a destabilization of whatever is going on. That your first reaction should be to step back and listen and to really see what's going on and really hear what's going on. Because right now, what's going on in the auditory and written and community level, world level as well, but certainly in terms of my country, the voices are staggering in what you are hearing. So I think having that space to step back into, to really take a breath and really listen and really hear and really do the work, whether it be journaling prompts, whether it be conversations going on with family and close friends and local community and those types of things. Stepping back into that space and really having those conversations with self, those conversations with people that are closest to you, and then really listening to those greater voices has been the place in which I have stepped back into. And so then the question becomes, in terms of my online presence, is what to do with this space, this YouTube space right now, because this YouTube channel was created to do deck walkthroughs. That's the purpose of this channel, was to do deck walkthroughs, tutorials on divination, which is something that I know about. That's something that I feel comfortable having a conversation about. To holding space in live chats for community, to step out, usually just for people to step out of life and be able to have a shared space of common passions and things that we enjoy. I'm not somebody who on this channel has conversations about human issues or political issues. The issue of racism is a human issue first. It is also a political issue, as I think all human issues and human right issues, they walk that line between politics because they do. But I think that the human aspect of things such as racism have to start in that human space, in that core human issue, so that people can get their footing and really make those internal changes that will then, of course, go outward into the land of politics. But it has to start from that place of humanity. Those are not conversations that I feel that I have any authority, any of a great deal of knowledge about all of the history and all of the components that go into those things, to be able to have a strong conversation about activism and engagement and those types of things surrounding such a powerful issue such as racism. There are many voices out there who they are qualified to do so, and those are the people that I'm going to stop and listen to. So that begs the question, what do I do with this particular space? Doing deck reviews doesn't feel to be particularly relevant right now to the world at large. Not that there is anything wrong with, in troubling times, stepping back into those things that give us a pause and let us think about other things for a minute and enjoy things that are impassioned. I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever, but it feels like a very low on the list conversation to be having. Live chats, I think right now, are really going to be tricky. It's not something that I would ask of the people who moderate my live chats to have to navigate or moderate the conversations that happen, because if you've ever been in one of my live chats, while I'm talking, whole conversations are taking place in the live chat and it's moving, and I wouldn't ask of my moderators to have to navigate that, and it's certainly something that I wouldn't feel comfortable having a conversation and trying to navigate and make sure that the space stays one that is respectful and that holds safe space for everybody. It's not something that I feel comfortable with at the moment as an open live chat. So deck walkthroughs, live chats, holding space for discussing our passions. That's primarily what my channel is about. The only thing that I feel like I can contribute to this conversation, other than the very important work of at a personal level of doing the readings and listening to people. And what I mean by doing the readings is doing the work of reading recommended texts, of listening to voices and hearing voices, and doing the internal work to sort through where are my biases, where are my issues, where is my complicity, where is that kind of internal work, doing my local work around me with my family and my friends and my extended community, and making sure that I'm doing that work that needs to be done. My space that I have to offer is one that really steps into deep listening. I think that for many people who aren't sure what they're supposed to be doing and really don't know, genuinely don't know what to do that is right, and a lot of reactionary things. I've seen a lot of people just reacting to the circumstances with best intentions, and those getting mixed reactions even from those best intentions. And so I would really caution that we all take a breath and that we all listen and really listen. There is a really good book by Thich Nhat called The Art of Communicating. And I would highly recommend people read this, because we can do all of the internal work and we can do all of the external work that's going on. But if we lose communication, if we lose the ability to really hear each other, I don't believe that we'll get very far. I know there's a lot of frustration of, okay, yep, this has got a lot of movement. There's a lot of conversation going on about racism. There's a lot of action that's going on about racism. But is it really going to change anything? And I think that the core, for me, the core of that change has to come from real communication. And that's a difficult one, right? The act of really hearing somebody and really listening and really being quiet so that person has the opportunity to speak and you have the opportunity to really hear what's going on, and then vice versa, that ability to speak and be really heard and listened to in a compassionate format, I think is key to any real progress that goes forward. So while we can do all of the important work that's what's going on both internally and externally, unless we can figure out a way to be able to really communicate those things, really hear those things, and really make space for that communication, you know, I am with a lot of other people in saying, how are things going to change? How are things going to be any different if that communication gets completely shut down? So I would definitely recommend The Art of Communicating by Thich Nhat. I have I think I have a video about some of my favorite books on Buddhism. Not that I think everybody needs to become a Buddhist, but there are some really great books out there about dealing with uncertainty, dealing with these types of scenarios in which you're at a complete loss, that change needs to happen and it needs to start within, and we're feeling completely disconnected and discombobulated. I do think it's a great place to step into for learning how to kind of calm and center and then move from that calm and center space, rather than moving from a reactionary space where you really don't know what you feel and you really haven't processed any of those things, and yet you're moving into active space when you haven't got that foundation. Now, if other people will have different ways of doing that, this is what I have to step back into for my own self and to give. So I really recommend any book by Thich Nhat. He also has a book on anger, Wisdom for Cooling the Flames. I don't know that everybody thinks that we need to cool the flames right now, but there's a lot of really good practices, whether you take it all or you take what works for you and what speaks to you or not. It has a lot of great wisdom to share, and from somebody who is speaking not from, this is what I think has always appealed to me about somebody like Thich Nhat Hanh, is that it's easy to say, okay, it's easy to be a Buddhist, or it's easy to be mindful, or it's easy to be compassionate. And that's where I really step into this space, that it's about compassion and grace. And I truly believe that if we don't start from a place of grace or compassion for ourselves and then outwardly to others, it's just going to be beating our heads up against the same thing round and round and round and round. You've heard me say it a million times on this channel. I truly do believe that we have to start from a place of grace, and by grace I do mean compassion. He didn't come from, in fact, he developed the understanding of a term of engaged Buddhism because he very much did not believe that you could simply just be a Buddhist or just be mindful or just be compassionate up on a mountaintop or in a monastery. He was in the midst of his influential times, was in the midst of the Vietnam War in his country and the slaughter that he witnessed of his country, of his friends, of his family, and on a very personal and a very large level. He came to the United States to push for compassionate listening and peaceful negotiations during that time, where which was in around the same time as a lot of the racial protests and things that were going on in the United States. In fact, Martin Luther King put him up or recommended him for a Nobel Peace Prize. So this isn't, he's not a person that is speaking just from the mountaintops or just from a place of, okay, it's pretty easy to be compassionate when you don't really have to experience life as it is. And that's not the case with him. He comes from a place of some horrific experiences. And so that, to me, it's easier for me to listen to somebody say those things that are a little bit more difficult to swallow, in terms of just be compassionate. Well, that's nice for you to say, but when I know his history, it gives it weight. And so that's why I tend to strongly recommend his book. Any of his books. I have those are the two that I think are probably the most applicable. Although I do think his being peace, again, any book of Thich Nhat Hanh's, I have a great deal of respect for. I also have a great deal of respect for Pema Chodron. The Places That Scare You, A Guide to Fearlessness in Difficult Times, is a fantastic book. She talks a lot about how when the shit hits the fan, and again, this was not somebody who lived her whole life in a monastery. She had a life, and she had a difficult life, and she went through hard experiences, and she learned that you can either become really hard and shut down due to difficult experiences, or you can let them open you up and soften you. And I think that the climate that we're in right now has the potential of either really hardening people on all sides of the equation, in which there is not going to be any change, or it can force us to soften. It can force us to open up, be vulnerable, listen, hear, change, have those, communicate in a way that is helpful to the world as a whole, not just ourselves on an individual level. So I do think that she has much to offer about sort of, again, being in the trenches of life, but still trying to find that space. So I've recommended this book a lot. I believe this might have been my very first book that I read on Buddhism. I read a couple books on Taoism, but I believe this was the very first book I might have read on Buddhism. I'm trying to see when this came out. Yeah, this was in the 90s. So I believe that's the case. So I would definitely recommend that. And then just for the core principles of Buddhism outside of a religious context, Stephen Batchelor's Buddhism Without Beliefs is one that I would say, if you know nothing about Buddhism, but you just kind of want to get a simple core understanding minus the any religion. I don't consider Buddhism to be a religion. It's a philosophical way of living. It's a philosophy to me. Religion for me has a connotation of divinity, and Buddha never claimed to be divinity. So for me, it's a way of living or a philosophy of living. So now there are obviously others that practice it in a much more of a religious mindset, and I'm not talking about that so much. So okay, so those are things that I can recommend. I do a lot of practice of loving kindness meditation. It has helped me across all different kinds of scenarios in life. I have a video on how to cheaply make a set of meditation beads and how I go about using them, that I will remember to link to below as a place. Again, the point of this is not that this is the answer, and I know that this isn't necessarily what people want to hear from me, but I can only speak from my space and speak what I have to say or what I have to bring to the table. And really, the only thing that I have to bring to the table on this subject, of all of these subjects, is that if I can offer a space to step back into, to breathe for a minute, to get your feet centered so that you can do that hard work of going within, because we can do all of the outer things, we can say all of the right things, we can donate money to all the right causes, all things in which we should be doing, whether that is on a local level or that is on a global level. But those are just outward manifestations. And if the real shift and the real change if we don't do the hard internal work first, that's not going to drive change. What's going to drive change, I truly believe, is that internal work, and then that communication and that open communication between everyone. I think that's the only way that's going to create lasting change. There is a plethora of information that is out there. People are putting up lists of reading material. People are putting up lists of videos to watch. There are commentary going on. There is a plethora, as I said, repeating myself, of information out there that you can find in order to stop and to listen. Although I would say, for a moment, just stop and listen to the voices, to the individual people who are crying out, to the individual voices who are sharing their experiences, and really hear those, because I think that when we can take racism out of this big word, right, this big concept, and we can pull that down and pull that inward to that understanding that this isn't about big things. It is, but at its core, it's about people. It's about individual people and the experiences they've had. And if we can really listen and hear those and not shut it off, so that we're like, I'm just not going to listen to that stuff because I'm angry about XYZ, but we can really hear that. I would argue that if we can really hear and really exercise compassionate listening, that you cannot help but be changed when you really hear people's speak, really hear people's sorrow, really hear people's pain. You will be changed by it. Or rather, as Pema Chodron would say, you'll either harden, but that means you're not really hearing. So you'll either be hard or you're going to be soft. And being soft does not mean love and light. Being soft is painful. Being soft is open and vulnerable. Being soft is really a difficult place to be, but it's the only place that leads to growth, and it's the only place that then leads to communication, that leads then to change. So yeah, that's what I have to offer. I'm doing the work that I need to do internally, and I hope that some of this helps in some small way. I think everybody needs to stay safe, stay grounded, stay open, and stay soft, and stay willing to listen and willing to hear, because that's the only way I think that we're going to be able to move forward.